Hi kids, today we're going to make bread. A nice loaf of ciabatta bread, in fact. And it doesn't take very many ingredients. It's just flour, salt, yeast, and water. And then we've got to give it quite a bit of time to rise before we bake it. So this is one that you need to plan ahead. And I'm going to show you a trick so that you can make the dough rise faster, which means you could mix up the dough in the morning, and then when you come home from work or school, you can do the second rise in the baking, which takes about 2 hours total. So there's 5 minutes of preparation, a long period of time while the dough rises, and then probably another 2 hours, an hour of rising again, and then basically roughly an hour to bake the bread. If you want to use the slow rise method, you need to have about 12 or 18 hours on the first rise. So let me show you how it works. I have a scale here. It's not really necessary. I'll give you the ingredient listings both in grams and by volume, which you're probably more used to. So I just have a bowl that I use, and I'll turn on my scale. You're going to need 3 cups of flour, which works out to be about 400 grams. And I use bread flour, but any flour will do. You can change it up. You can use some whole wheat if you'd like to make more of a brown bread. And I get about 400 grams, which as I said is about 3 cups. Then you're going to need some sugar. You're going to need some salt. And I just dump a little in here, probably 10 or 15 grams, something like that. It's just a good shake of table salt. And then we're going to do, I'm going to do the fast rise method. And for that, I'm going to use 3/8 of a teaspoon of yeast. If you want to use the slow rise method, you'd use just a 1/4 teaspoon. So there's 1/4 and a half of another 1/4, something like that. Again, it's not critical, just get close on these things. Okay, that's that. Now we're going to use the fast rise method, so we're going to put warm water in. If we're using the slow rise method, we put cool water in. And you're going to need 1 1/3 cups of water, which is 300 grams. So I want to make sure that the water is warm, because when you use the fast rise method, I'll zero out my scale and add 300 grams of water, or 1 1/3 cups, 297, 300 right on the dot. Again, not critical. Okay, move this aside. If you're using a scale, turn it off. The next piece of advice is pretty important. Get a nice piece of paper towel. Okay, now it's time to mix the dough. This is a no-knead recipe, so all we do is just make sure that we've incorporated all of the salt, the flour, the yeast, until everything is nicely stirred together. There's no reason to do any more than that. I like to use my hands rather than a spoon, and this is the time that I always think about the people in my life that are important to me and that I love. I don't know if it makes a difference in the way the bread tastes, but it's good to think about that on a regular basis. And I make bread pretty often, so that's just what I do. Okay. Keep mixing, turning it over, get all of that flour incorporated. You can see now why I got the paper towel out in advance. I suppose you could use a mixer, but I like to keep the mess to a minimum. And like I said, this is a good time for me to think about the people I care about. Okay, that looks pretty good. Nice and sticky. Get as much off as you can. There you go. And then that's when I use my paper towel. Get most of this stuff off. It's good to get this off onto something you can throw away rather than toss down the sink, because the stuff's pretty sticky and could clog the sink, I suppose. Okay. Now take a dish plate, or if you don't have a dish plate that fits on your bowl, saran wrap, something like that. You don't want to seal it. You just want a loose cover. And now we're going to go put this someplace out of the sunshine, out of a draft, and hopefully relatively warm. You don't want it hot, but warm is good. And we're using the fast rise recipe, so we'll wait about 6 or 7 hours until it's doubled, and we'll see what it looks like when we come back. Okay, so now we've let the dough rise. If you're doing it on the quick path, the quick version, it's 6 or 7 hours. If you do the long version, as we said, it'll be more like 12 to 18 hours, something like that. You're looking for the dough to have doubled in size, and you'll see there's some nice bubbles in there. That's the yeast turning the sugars and the flour into carbon dioxide. Okay, so we've got that set. We'll just let that set aside for a second. I've got a nice big thing of flour, which you saw earlier. And so what I want to do now, we're going to fold the bread, which means we're going to get it ready for its second rise. Second rise is much shorter, only about an hour to 2 hours, whatever you'd like. But to do that, we need to put down a fair amount of flour here so that the dough doesn't stick to the board. So don't be chintzy, don't be shy with the flour. I usually make sort of a rectangular shape, and you'll see why in just a second. Make sure there's plenty in the middle, because that's where the loaf is going to end up. Okay. There we go. That looks pretty good. Now we're going to take the bowl. Why don't you come around the other side of me? We're going to take the bowl and just a rubber spatula, and you'll see that all of the dough comes out, you know, sort of all together. And all you have to do is sort of scrape the dough from the edges, like that. See those strings? Oh, this is looking really good. Okay, so we've now pulled the dough onto our floured board. I'm going to flour my hands a little bit, and what you want to do is shape the dough into something that's roughly the size of a piece of paper, 8.5 by 11, roughly. Doesn't have to be perfect. You don't want to work the dough too much, but don't be afraid of it either. Okay, so my hands are getting a little sticky, so I'm going to put a little more flour on. Now what you do now is you want to fold this on the long side into 3 pieces. So you're going to see I'm going to flip this edge over towards the middle, and then this edge over. I'm going to turn the whole thing so that it's seamed down, and we're going to make sure that we got flour on the bottom. So fold that side over, then I'm going to just kind of do this, roll it over, and then make sure we got some flour underneath it. Gently shape it into something that looks like a loaf. This is why it's called a ciabatta. If you can't tell, ciabatta is slipper in Italian, and so this is a sort of long and not too high. We're going to sprinkle a little more flour on top. The only reason we're doing that is so that the dish towel that we're going to use doesn't stick to the dough. So just a simple dish towel will work. You could use plastic wrap if you have to. And then go put this in the same nice, warm, draft-free place that we put the dough when it was doing its first rise. This is the second rise. We're going to let this sit for another hour, 2 hours. It's going to get a little bit bigger, and then we're going to pop it in the oven. Okay. Now, as the bread is doing its second rise, when you're about 20 minutes or maybe a half an hour before you think that's going to be done, so maybe a half an hour or 40 minutes after you've started the second rise, you want to fire up the oven, and you want to put it on the hottest temperature you can with a pizza stone in it and some sort of lid that will cover the loaf. So this is what I use. This is just an inexpensive top from a roasting pan. We got this at Target. You can find them probably anywhere. This does a nice job. And the reason to cover up the loaf is to capture the moisture that's in the dough, and that will make for a really, really nice crust. So we're going to put this in the oven, so it's preheated. As you can see, we've got our stone in there as well. Make sure there's plenty of room so that you can take the lid off when the bread is on the stone. Bake, and then you want to go to the highest setting you possibly can. For our oven, that's 550. A lot of ovens won't go that high, some go higher. And then let it preheat. It'll be nice and hot and ready to go for the loaf. You can see it's a lot bigger. Come on over here and take a look. It's probably doubled again in volume. I'm just letting a lot of this dust off this dish towel. Now we're going to put it on the the pizza stone. The pizza stone and the lid from the roasting pan have been warming up for, I don't know, maybe a half an hour at the highest temperature you can get it, maybe about 550 degrees. We're going to put this in there, we're going to put the lid on top, we're going to keep it at the highest temperature for about 15 minutes, then we're going to turn it down to 475. We're going to leave the lid on for about a half an hour, take the lid off after that, take a look at things, and maybe cook it for another 10 to 20 minutes until it's golden brown. Pull it out, put it on a cooling rack, and let it rest, and then we'll tear into it. Okay, so now we've got the challenge is to make sure there's enough flour underneath here so that the dough, the loaf, doesn't stick to the stone. And I'm using a pasta scraper to do that. You could use a metal spatula in a pinch, that'll work just fine. But if you can spring for a pastry knife or whatever they call these things, that'd be good. And I'm just sneaking a little flour underneath here to make sure it doesn't stick. This dough is a little bit wet, and that's the way it should be. It's normally a little bit wet, so I just want to make sure that it doesn't stick. Real bummer if it sticks to the pizza dough. Okay, now, pizza stone. Okay, now I'm going to get my mitts or pads. I'm going to open up the oven. I'm going to take the lid out, put this on there, cover it up, 15 minutes, turn down the temperature to 475, half an hour total, so another 15 minutes. Take the lid off, then 10 to 20 minutes until it's golden brown. Lid out, put it someplace that can handle the heat. Pull the rack out, pizza stone is there, whew, a little warm. I'm going to sneak this in, sneak my hands under here, grab this, very carefully put it on the pizza stone, just like that. And then remember to use your mitt. The lid is hot. Cover it up. Push this back and close it up. Remember, 15 minutes, we'll turn it down to 475, half an hour, we'll take the lid off, another 10 to 20 minutes, it'll be done. Okay, so it's been 15 minutes. I'm going to turn the temperature down to 475. I'm going to leave it in another 15 minutes, take the lid off. You know the drill. Okay, turn it down. Perfect. Okay, it's been a half an hour. We're going to take the lid off. We'll let it bake just a little bit longer after that. So very carefully reach into your oven. Ooh, I'm all fogged up. And lift the lid off without knocking the bread. So you got it. Put this down someplace safe. Okay, it's been about maybe 45 or 50 minutes since we first put the loaf in. We waited, I don't know, 10-15 minutes, turned the temperature down, then we waited another 15 minutes or so that it was in about half an hour, took the lid off, and then waited another 15 to 20 minutes until the bread is a golden chestnut brown. It's ready to come out, so let's grab it. It's a beauty. There you go. No more than 4. That's what your loaf of bread will look like. Let it sit for maybe 10-15 minutes, half an hour, something like that. You'll hear it sing. It's going to make this beautiful sound. Cut into it, eat it right away. That's the most important part about good bread, is eating it fresh. Enjoy.
No,